What's happening? And welcome back. If this is your first time checking in, man, I am Adrian Taylor, Mr. GC. But make sure to like, subscribe, and comment, man. I think this is going to be the most informative video I've ever made when it comes to learning Spanish. Like I said, man, I'm no expert, but at the same time, I wanted to build a community as I'm becoming, more fluent in Spanish. So that way people can talk about their journeys and not necessarily always get information for people that, are 2 to 3 years, they've learned the language. Now they're fluent and they're telling you how to learn it. Like I'm telling you my pivots throughout this, whole entire process. And so today, man, I want to talk about something that really was a game changer for me. And I don't know if anybody can, relate to this, but, when I first started learning Spanish, everyone was telling me how I needed to learn more vocabulary, learn more vocabulary, learn more vocabulary, learn all the rules. And this became tedious, right? Because I started spending a lot of time learning vocabulary and I learned a lot, but my communication skills were lacking. And, me being able to understand in context was lacking, right? It's one thing to have the word thrown at you, right? Decir, right? You know what that means, typically to say if you don't, but we can go down the list. But you start to learn all these different vocabulary words, but say someone is speaking, especially native are speaking using these vocabulary words, you can't even pick it up. You can't even hear it or understand it. And I would struggle, but I couldn't understand why. And so the turning point for me was I was actually sitting in this group and this guy, he was more effective communicating than I was, but he would ask me for different vocabulary words, right? Like, oh, Adrian, what's the word for this? And I'll tell him, and then he'll continue his conversation, right? I'm sitting there like, wow, this guy can speak better than me, but clearly I know way more vocabulary words than he does because he always asking me for vocabulary words in the group. I was like, yeah, something's off about that. I need to take a step back and figure out how come I know all these words, but I can only use the basic words, And so what I started to do was I had to start listening to context more on repeat. Even if I barely understood it, I would just keep listening to, short blurbs, right? 2-3 sentences over and over and over, have it repeated 4 times. And then, bringing in another phrase or another couple of sentences. And that's how I started to turn the needle, because once I started being able to hear it in context, it improved my speaking ability or in conversation. And I think that's one thing that we have to ask ourselves is, what is our first goal, right? I think most people's first goal is to be able to speak, right? And hold conversations. It's not to go and write a perfect paper in Spanish. You want to be able to communicate first. And then you want to worry about, pronunciation, and everything else that comes with it. And so think about it, right? You have a 2 or 3 year old. They have a basic vocabulary, minimal vocabulary. But 9 times out of 10, they can still get their point across, right? And they can understand you as well, too, basically. And so that's how we have to approach this thing. You have to continue to listen, input, keep taking that input in, or you'll be like I was, knew a lot of words, could read and write, but my conversation was minimal. For me, listening is the hardest thing. So it's not reading, it's not writing, it's listening. So I had to pivot to start listening more. So me listening to Casa Cerrado, me listening to novelas, and Netflix series and everywhere, right? Like I'm doing all of that. And that's when I started, it started clicking, because just having a vocabulary word without context is not going to help you in the long run, right? You have to be able to understand, in total, like what's being said and not just one word, right? Because if you're listening for that one word, it's going to miss you. And that's what will happen to me. And then, of course, they'll say what they said, and then they repeat it, or they repeat it slow. And then I write it down and I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh, I understand exactly what they're saying, but I couldn't catch it. It was extremely hard for me to catch it. So you have to listen and consistently listen. I would tell people to spend more time listening than anything else. That's my experience. But I mean, of course, if listening is the easiest thing for you, then you're not going to do it. But for me, everything else came pretty easy. I never had like a quote unquote, which I was told, I don't really have a gringo accent. So I never really had to work on my accent per se. I knew I wanted a Caribbean type accent. And so that's all I listened to and kind of studied, that dialect. But in the streets, though, you got to remember, they speak extremely fast. And let me tell you, the first time I went to Puerto Rico, I'm thinking like, oh, my Spanish is getting better. And my guy, first thing he said to me was buenas tardes. Of course, he didn't say it like that, right? I had no clue what he said. And so I'm talking to my wife. I'm like, what? Like, guess what? It's just like, he said buenas tardes. But of course, he dropped a whole bunch of letters, said it extremely fast. It totally went over my head. I was like, oh man, I'm in trouble. And I knew from that point on, I was gonna be in trouble. You feel me? My Spanish was a disaster. But I mean, that was a while ago. I can't remember. But yeah, so hey man, make sure that you have a plan in place as far as what's important to you to learn first. You know what I'm saying? We're gonna talk about that in the community. Make sure y'all share the videos. Leave a comment, to help somebody out. Because if conversation is your number one goal, then why are you spending so much time on writing all of these different sentences now, right? Why are you spending so much time reading? Even though reading is good, especially if you read out loud. Read out loud. Don't read to yourself. I don't read to myself in Spanish. I'm not there yet. I mean, I can, but I realized that was a trap too, because I understand and I sound perfect in my mind. But then when you start saying it out loud, you're like, whoa, you fumbling words, everything. Until you get, at a great level that you feel comfortable with, I would read out loud. Trust me. Try it. If you're reading to yourself books, read out loud. Trust me. So yeah, man, but make sure that you have a plan of what you're trying to accomplish first. Hey, some people might want to read and write in Spanish, and speaking isn't their, biggest thing they're trying to accomplish. I don't know any people like that. So, but if that's you, then that's what you work on. But we can't continuously try to speak the language, and all we're doing is spending a lot of time on writing and reading and learning vocabulary. You need to learn vocabulary, right? But you also need to listen to conversations so that way you can get the context and how they're using it. Because you doing it on your own is going to be tough. Another thing that you can do is write things down, right? And then read it out loud and record yourself and then re-listen to it. Or something I did was I would write out paragraphs and I would have a native speaker read it, record it, and then I would play it back to see how it fits in my mind to kind of get the grasp of how they say it, with the speed and indentations on everything, right? Perfect way to learn. Hey man, I'm telling you, this has been a game changer for me to help me get to that next level. Because I know a lot of people get stuck after a while. If you're trying not to get stuck, you got to change it up. All right, man. I hope this video helped you out. Drop a comment if there's something that you want me to talk about as far as some of my struggles as I continue my progress. Here it is. We are 4 months in. Hey, we ain't stopping. I told you January, that was a New Year's resolution. This is what we were going to spend our time and focus on, was getting to understanding and being fluent in the language that you are looking to be fluent in. All right, man. Peace.